So I'm one of those folks who really loves their job, which means I've irritated half of the audience and inspired half of them already. And the reason I love my job, part of it is about the improvisation. At least two reasons I love my job are down to improvisation. The first thing, and it's Homer Simpson who recognized this and said it the most succinctly, he said, "Oh, those jazz musicians, they're just making stuff up." And it's true, and when you actually think about that, it's true to a degree. When you actually think about it, that takes the pressure off you as a musician. You know, if you're in a tribute band playing Beatles songs, and you don't play it exactly the way it was written, people afterwards will be going, "They're not really like the Beatles, are they? They didn't sound as good as the Beatles." But in jazz, we're kind of making it up, and that takes so much pressure off because you can make a mistake. In fact, in Spinal Tap, they said jazz is not really music, they said in Spinal Tap. Jazz is like an accident. It's like an accident waiting to happen. So when we make accidents in jazz, the rest of the band cover for us, or we look really deeply and say, "I meant to do that, you know, that was deliberate." So that's one of the advantages of playing jazz and the improvisation of jazz. Another good thing about jazz is because you're really listening, as Helen said, you know, you're in the moment and you're listening to each other, you support each other. And if nobody else is listening in the audience, at least your band are listening to you, so you have some audience there. And sometimes, just occasionally, something really, really special happens in those moments. It doesn't happen all the time. That's one of the myths of jazz. But sometimes something really special happens, and I want to show you a video at the end of the session today which gives one of those examples, fortunately. The third reason I like my job has got nothing to do with improvisation. The third reason is that if you're a musician, say you're at a party in DC and somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" And you say, "I'm a musician." They'll tend to go, "Ooh, that's interesting. Really?" And then they'll ask another question, "Well, what do you play?" And you can take it in one of two ways. You can either say, if you're stupid, you make this mistake, you say, "I'm a guitarist." And they go, "Oh, forget it, you know, and you're not a real musician. Everybody plays guitar." But if you say, "I'm a jazz musician," they go, "Ooh, really? I love jazz. I've always loved jazz. I wish I could get out to see more jazz all the time." And you suddenly get this kind of feeling that you're sophisticated and intelligent and intense and wonderful. And people collude with you on this, you know, and they treat you terribly nicely. So that's the third reason. But there's a problem with that because that feeds perfectly into the first of the jazz myths. And the first of the jazz myths, this is going to work, isn't it? The birth of the cool and why it's not so cool. Let's look for a second at the iconic jazz players. We've got a few photographs here. Miles Davis. He actually did an album called The Birth of the Cool, and Miles is the guy who took jazz from being dance music and fun music to being something intellectual and cool. Stan Getz, the great jazz saxophone player. Billie Holiday, great singer from Baltimore. There we go. He's had tough times, great trumpet player. John Coltrane. What you notice about all of these people is they're very intellectual. It's all very cool, it's very intense. These people have lived. Nina Simone. And these are the images, these are the iconic images which feed this myth about if you're a jazz player, you're cool. And the problem with that is they also say you've got to be intense and sophisticated and you've lived life and you've been there in order to play jazz. And that kind of holds us back. That's why I only started to play jazz 10 years ago, was because I thought I've got to get some gray hairs or no hairs. You know, I've got to develop this depth in me and do lots of study and get very intense. This chap, Joe Pass, he was the one who really got me going on jazz. Maybe 30 years ago, I listened to his album with Ella Fitzgerald. It's still my favorite album to this day. Just a guitar, just a voice. It's perfect. And like the others, Joe Pass had had a really difficult past. He'd had mental illness, he'd had drug problems, he'd studied and studied forever, very intense player. And he, again, even though I loved his music, it took me so long before I had the nerve to even try to play in that style. So this idea of being cool is something that holds us back. I'm not enough, I'm not experienced enough, I'm not cool enough, I'm not studied enough. And yet, since I've been playing jazz, what I've discovered is lots of 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who play brilliantly. You don't have to be old. You can be a nerd and play jazz. Exhibit A. And so it's possible. And this is one of the things we've got to get over, is saying, oh, I've got to be this, I've got to do that. Jazz myth number 2, musicians are like teenagers. They know everything. And this is that intensity you've got to know. If you listen to jazz musicians talking sometimes, and I know a lot of you in this room will be musicians, just because you're very intellectual, and most people who are very intellectual have played music at some stage. But if you listen to jazz musicians, they might say, oh yeah, next song, it's just a 2-5-1 progression, it's in E flat, we're going to go to the head, we're going to double back, we're going to do a tag on the end. And even the musicians in the room have no idea what I'm talking about. And so they've got this great jargon, which again distances us from doing it. You know, it's something that's beyond our learning even. So that's one of the problems too, is that they work in this way. The other kind of intellectual aspect of jazz is this sense that if you haven't gone to school and learned everything, you can't do it. And so I used to live in France, and I had a couple of kids who I wanted to learn. I still have the kids. I wanted them to learn how to play music. And so I thought I'll put them in classes, and I wanted them to play guitar, of course. And I was told, well, okay, what we do in France, for the first year, we do this thing called solfège. And solfège is music theory. And I said, so when did they start to play guitar? And they said, well, after the first year, when they've got like a black belt in solfège, then we'll let them take the weapon out of the case and play it. So for 1 year, they weren't actually allowed to touch the instrument. They had to learn the theory. How many great bands have come out of France in the last 50 years? I mean, is it any wonder the Beatles were from Liverpool? I mean, give me a break. So this, and I don't want to rubbish education, because education's good and it's the doorway for a lot of people, but it's not necessary, it's not essential. And so many times, even in America, if you're going to learn to play an instrument, you spend the first few weeks learning how to sit, how to put your hands, and so on. And I've met an awful lot of musicians who spent 8, 9, 10 years learning to play piano, and they say, yeah, I'm a pretty good pianist, but I can't play unless there's sheet music in front of me. And they regret that terribly. They want to play with people, and they regret that fact. So the education holds us back. And yet, when you look at some of the greatest music of the 20th century, it was made by people who had no music education. If you look at the Beatles, the Stones, people like that, virtually no music education. Even in jazz, the most memorable guitarist of the 20th century is Django Reinhardt. He was a gypsy from Belgium, and he literally lived in a caravan, and he couldn't read or write, never mind read or write music. And he's made the most memorable, impressive guitar music, and people all over the world still emulate Django. So that's the third myth. Here's my favorite myth of all. I'm a jazz musician. I never play the same thing twice. Somehow this music comes to me from the gods. I have an antenna. My antenna's here, and I'm sensing this stuff and making it up. Beautiful. That's what makes people think I'm cool. But it's a load of old rot, basically, because what we play is what we've heard. It's like a language. You know, musicians, when they're improvising, string together phrases and words like we do sentences. It's as simple as that. And there's no way that you can pull this music. If you had an Indian sitar player and you said, okay, sit in with this jazz band and let's play some American jazz, it's going to sound like an Indian sitar player playing jazz. It's not going to sound like American jazz. And a lot of the time, you know, we've heard these phrases over and over since we were born, and Western music makes sense to us, just like Vietnamese music makes sense to Vietnamese people, but not necessarily to us. So this idea that we're pulling all of this influence from the air is really crazy, and it's wonderful. I love to keep pushing that idea because it makes me sound cool, but it's nonsense in reality. So how did I get over these myths and actually start to pick up a guitar and play jazz those years ago? Well, I went to one of these adult summer camps down in the Shenandoah Valley, which was jazz camp for grown-ups, and it was full of apologetic elderly gentlemen like myself saying, you know, we've been playing for 20 years, but we never had the nerve to do jazz. And I had two great teachers, the teacher Steve Abshire, who one day said something which made the big difference for me. And he said, you know, I was listening to the band last night jamming, and there was a trombone player. He said, those trombone players, they play the most beautiful music. It's these melodious, long notes. They play melodies. He said, why is it that jazz guitar players like me play the notes, all the notes we can, as fast as we possibly can? instead of playing these melodies. I wish we played more like that. And then a couple of days later, another guitar teacher sat in with him and they did a jam together, like a masterclass. And this second guy, Tom Mitchell, was playing these solos, and as he played, he was singing all of the time. And somebody said, "Why do you sing the solos that you're playing?" And he said, "If you can't sing it, don't play it." He said there are too many jazz musicians who just go through these patterns with their fingers, these scales that they've learned, instead of making music, which is what it's all about. So what I want to try and do is give a quick demonstration of this, because you all sing in the bath, I think. And you'll see that it is actually doable. We can actually make this happen, crazily enough. The technology is going to work perfectly, I can guarantee. And this is the interactive part of the program. So this is the one where you have to clap in time, on the 2 and the 4 beat, because that's jazz. If you do it on the 1 beat, that's polka or German music. So here we go. Keep that going, it's going to help me enormously. You're beautiful. We want a beautiful audience. I've got to get in time with you. Simple blues. We've heard this lots of times. Let's see what happens. Go. Thank you very much. So that's if you can sing it, you can play it. It's as simple as that. I didn't know what I was going to play today, other than that it was a blues, and that's the way we start a lot of the improvisation. We set the structure and then go from there. Chick Corea talked about improvisation, and he said it's more than just doing solos. He uses improvisation to compose as well. And he said, you know, what he does in his band Return to Forever would be to improvise every night on stage. And eventually they would chuck out all the bad stuff and the boring stuff, and they'd keep the good stuff, and then they'd call that a song and record it. And so we would use that as a way to actually create music through improvisation. And a lot of the time in jazz, what we do is we take different styles of music and we clash them together. And so all the action now is saying, how can we merge African music with Cuban music, or how can we merge jazz and bluegrass to make something new? And that's another style of improvisation. I want to show you a little video in the time I've got left, which shows how we do that in our band. And just to set this up a little bit, some years ago I was at a party, and I was sitting next to a Senegalese kora player, as one often is at a party. And the kora is a 21-string harp. Very difficult to play, very difficult to build into tune as well. Beautiful instrument, just gorgeous. And he was playing this song, and I sat with him and started to play something along with it, just to improvise. But it was, at the back of my mind, there was a song that I'd written maybe 12 years earlier. Now, a year later, the Strathmore said, we want to commission a new piece of music for you to perform. And I thought back to this moment. I said, I wonder if I can get Amadou, the kora player, to come and join me on this and bring him in the band. And we did, and we videoed the performance there. So this was the first time ever that this song got performed in that format. My lovely wife, Lynn, was singing, so she knew the vocals. The other two musicians had never met Amadou until we stepped on stage with him that night. So this is a song called Love and Surrender, which brings together that what was actually a 17th century Senegalese melody with a folk song that I'd written to create something new. We're recording that song, it'll be on the next album. That's more marketing. So at the end of the day, if you notice there's no music stands. We just got on the stage together for the first time. We're watching each other constantly. We're listening to each other constantly. And that's the core to the improvisation. I've got to finish now, and the key part that I want to say is don't allow the myths. Whatever it is you're doing, whether it's business, writing books, cooking, don't let the myths be the obstacle. Let's democratize improvisation. You don't have to, you can't say I'm not experienced enough, I'm not old enough, I've not done the master's degree, I've not done, if you're going to be a surgeon, do the master's degree. But there's so many fields where you don't have to have read the 26 books and done the studies and so on, and you don't have to have lived a hard life. Just do it. Go and democratize improvisation. Thank you.